Hey everyone, Ace here, he, she. We're coming out with another Podfic. This is chapter 2 of Kaijin, written by Namadi. I'm sorry if I'm butchering names. I'm going to read trigger warnings right now, right now, because I feel like these ones need to be said. They will also be in the description along with the link. So here's the trigger warnings, which are as child abuse, blood, description of injuries, panic attacks, drugs, reference to child prostitution, sort of very brief. And we're going on to chapter 2, damaged goods. Izuku's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week. Here we go. Your son is quirkless. 4 words. That was all it took to bring Izuku's hopes and dreams, his whole life, crashing down. What do you mean, quirkless? His mother asked, her mask slipping a little, making the doctor stutter slightly at the cold tone. See this joint here? He pointed to the upper joint in the x-ray of Izuku's little toe. People with quirks don't have this joint. It's unnecessary in humans. So, as we evolved, the joint disappeared. Quirkless people have the joint because they haven't evolved to the same level as a quirked person. Unevolved, worthless, useless. Thank you, doctor. The mother and son left. Izuku could feel anger rolling off his mom in waves. Excuse me. He had to stay quiet, to be as unabrasive as possible. When they reached home, Izuku tried his best to escape to his room without making it look like he was running away. The house was still for the rest of the day. Izuku barely dared to move. He was even afraid the scratching of his pencil in his analysis notebooks would draw his mother's attention. It was 4 a.m. by the time he fell asleep, as far from the door as he could get. He woke to his mother's voice just on the other side of the door. I'm sorry, Katsuki, but Izuku will never be a hero. Izuku froze. She had told Katsuki? She told his best friend that he was useless? Oh, sorry. Izuku froze. She had told Katsuki. She told his best friend that he was useless, that he was worthless, that he had failed his one purpose. You'll get a strong quirk, nerd. You have to, or we can't be the #1 hero duo. A quirkless person can't be a hero. His mother continued. He'll only get himself or someone else killed. You have a wonderful quirk, Katsuki. You'll be a great hero, but without Izuku, it's better this way. I lost where I am. Here we are. Mom was right. It was better. Katsuki would be the best hero. He didn't need a quirkless freak holding him back. I'm sorry, Mitsuki, but I have to make lunch. Izuku didn't eat his breakfast. How long has he slept? The clock said 11 a.m. All Izuku's muscles locked up. He had slept in, lazy, useless, good for nothing. Finally awake, lazy brat. Izuku scrambled out of bed, keeping his head down and his shoulders low, making him as small as possible. What a fucking disappointment. Fucking null. What makes the Bakugos think? They let a disgusting wrench befriend their perfect child. You're not even worthy to be his sidekick. Izuku bit back a sob. He could hear his mother moving deeper into the room, slowly walking along the shelves against his wall. Katsuki never wants to see you again. The sound of something being dragged across the rough wooden shelves made Izuku's head snap up. Inko held a framed photo of Izuku and Katsuki grinning at the camera. Present Mike kneeled between them, grinning just as wide. He hates you, Izuku. The picture fell from her hands, shattered on the ground, glass skittering across the floor. Those heroes you worship? She picked up a globe and threw it on the ground, where it exploded. The little figurine of Fat Gum dressed as Santa snapping off and laying amongst the glass and glitter. They won't save you. You're better off dead. With a sweep of her arm, she knocked several small figurines to the floor. The Cacophony? The cacophony of snaps and crunches made Izuku flinch and bite back a whine, even as tears began to stream down his face. I'm sorry if I sound a little watery. So, yeah. His tears only seemed to spur Inko on. Where's my notes? Give me a quick sec. Writing words I cannot say, so I can put them into the description and hopefully someone can make it easier for me to say. There we go. Holding eye contact with her crying son, Inko picked up a sealed box containing Izuku's most treasured possession. Izuku's eyes widened and he began to sob and beg his mother to stop. Katsuki gave him that silver-aged All Might figurine. It meant more to him than every other piece of hero merch he owned. Not even All Might can save you. She dropped the box and stomped on it. Izuku screamed. Inko dove forward and grasped her son by the hair, her fingernails cutting his scalp as she yanked him forward. Glass dug into his bare feet and he cried out as his knees buckled, leaving him dangling by his curls. You deserve nothing. You're nothing. Izuku didn't have time to brace himself as his display of hero themes enamel pins was bashed into the side of his face. He was flung to the floor, where glass and broken plastic cut into his right hip and arm. Something warm and sticky began running down his face and dripped off his chin, mixing with the tears.
"Clean this up,"
Inko screamed, kicking him as he was on his hands and knees, causing more cuts and one of the pins to stab into his hand. Miss Choke's face grinned up at him when he looked.
"Now."
A blow was delivered in the regular spot between Izuku's shoulder blades, causing him to gasp. The familiar feeling of burning welts and deep bruises seared across the child's back. Izuku shifted his weight to his knees and whimpered as more glass ground into his skin. Inko stood above him, holding her favorite weapon, a wooden cane she had stolen from the hospital. Izuku began to pick up the pieces of his beloved collection, throwing them into the trash can under his desk. His fingers began bleeding, the red swirling into grotesque patterns in the sparkly fluid of the snow globe. When he wasn't fast enough, Inko brought the cane down on his back, shoulders, and neck, again and again, until he started sweeping the glass up with the side of his hand, ripping the skin open.
"Hurry up, you lazy brat."
Inko rapped Izuku on the head, causing the boy to see scars.
"I'm not cleaning up all your blood in that glittery crap."
Izuku didn't know what to do. How could he wipe up the blood with only his hands? Izuku's brain felt fuzzy. His body shook with pain and he could barely keep his arms stable. Every movement was agony. He could feel his pulse through his whole body, knocking against his bones. The pressure in his chest from his shallowed sobs and screams built until he was sure his lungs would burst.
Useless, worthless, good for nothing. No one loves you. No one will save you. Better off dead.
Izuku choked as Inko grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled hard, almost lifting him off the ground and making him wheeze as his air supply was cut off.
"Take it off."
Izuku understood. He pulled his shirt off, using it as a rag, he wiped up what he could, only leaving some sparkles and faded red stain on the hardwood.
"Was that so hard?"
The cane slammed into Izuku's ribs with a sickening smack. With a sickening smack knocking the 6-year-old over. Izuku curled into the fetal position, arms covering his head.
"I should kill you,"
Inko said, pressing the end of the cane onto his neck.
"Put you out of your misery and do the world a favor."
Izuku's breath hitched as the final tormented piece of his heart shattered. He wanted it to stop. There was nothing left for him. His mother never loved him. Katsuki would move on. His heroes wouldn't save him. He felt oddly numb and empty as the cane was pulled away after one last jab. He didn't even tense up for the next blow. Better off dead. The blow never came. Izuku dared to peek between his arms. Inko was looking at him. She pressed her lips and hummed thoughtfully, a wicked gleam in her eye. To Izuku's surprise, she threw the cane aside. That rhymes. Surprise and aside. Anywho, sorry. To Izuku's surprise, she threw the cane aside. A gleeful grin split her face. Or you may still be worth something. Izuku squeaked when Inko dove down and grabbed a fistful of hair. She dragged him out the door and down the hall. Izuku scrambled to get his feet under him, to keep his aching back from scraping on the hardwood. The hall closet opened, and Izuku was thrown into the small room. The coppery scent of blood was always strong in the closet. The floor stained permanently red-brown from years of a bleeding child sleeping on the ground. Mommy is going out, Izuku, Inko said sweetly, casting a shadow over his shaking form. Be good and stay here. Think about how you can be a better son. The door slammed, and Izuku was plagued into darkness. Izuku didn't know how long he had been in the closet. All he knew was that he had passed out twice and that he was hungry. The darkness smothered him, making his already aching chest feel tight. His limbs were heavy, and it felt like someone was pressing the heels of their hands into his eyes. The closet felt vast. He held perfectly still, his brain telling him that if he rolled over, he would fall into an infinity void. His breathing came out in gasps that echoed around the emptiness. Desperate to get his bearings, Izuku carefully reached out until his fingers pressed to the wall. It was mere inches from his face. Suddenly, the walls were closing in. It was too cramped, too stuffy, too stifling. Stifling? I feel like I'm saying that wrong. A fearful sob ripped out of his throat. He scrambled onto his hands and knees, ignoring the pain, frantically looking for the door. He found the raised door jamb quickly. He felt the splintered gouges from past escape attempts under his fingertips as he reached out to grip the cold door handle, using it to pull himself up. He rattled the handle. As always, it was locked. Izuku didn't realize he was sobbing, screaming as he pulled on the handle and banged on the door, begging to be let out. He would be good. He was scared. He was suffocating. He was dying. His skin split and bled, but he kept banging. He cut his arm on a large piece of wood that had peeled away from the door. Gripping it tightly, he ripped it off and dove back, looking for more. He took the door apart piece by piece. He would see the light again. Feel the air again. His fingernails broke against the wood grain. But Izuku didn't care. Not when every sliver tore away was bringing him closer to freedom. One of his nails was ripped off, and Izuku didn't stop. He prayed that the next scratch would let the light in, but the light never came. It wasn't enough. Izuku was tired. The darkness was enveloping him as he fell back into unconsciousness. It felt more softer than the void of the closet. When Izuku woke again, something had changed. Izuku could see. There was light seeping in under the door, just enough for Izuku to spot a small bowl of white rice sitting on the ground. Izuku's stomach howled with hunger. He snatched the bowl and began stuffing the soggy grains into his mouth. They were bland and overcooked, but it was the best thing Izuku had ever tasted. With his stomach as full as he could hope, Izuku started analyzing. Getting food meant one of two things. One was that they were expecting the Bakugos. Izuku's heart sank at the thought. He would never see the Bakugos again. Katsuki hated him. He didn't want a useless null ruining his chance to become a pro hero. The second option was that it had been 3 days in the closet. Inko seemed to have changed her mind about killing him, so she would do the bare minimum to keep him alive. It was rare that Izuku was punished by extended stays in the closet, but when he was, Inko always fed him every 3 days. At Izuku's best guess, it was Wednesday afternoon. Footsteps were coming down the hall. Izuku's panic spiked. He scrambled into the back corner, metal squeaking as the key was turned and the door was thrown open. Izuku hissed and looked away, shielding his burning eyes from the light. He had wanted so desperate. Shielding his burning eyes from the light, he wanted so desperately to see. Harsh hands grabbed Izuku's wrist and chin to wrench his face up. Inko studied him closely, taking in the dry blood down the left side of his face and the broken nails on his shredded fingers. She clicked her tongue in annoyance. "Look what you've done, Izuku. You're no good like this. Damaged goods are worthless." She wrenched him to his feet and dragged him into the bathroom. Izuku did his best to keep up on shaky legs. In the bathroom, Inko made him strip. She studied him again, noting the sluggishly bleeding cuts on his knees where the glass was still embedded in the skin. She thrust a small first aid kit into his chest, making his bruised ribs scream. "Clean and bandage yourself up. We can't fix you, but we can make you look presentable." She left the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Izuku had never been so confused in all his life. Letting him take a bath and treat his wounds was almost kind for Inko. Something was up. Izuku was almost tempted to not obey. Whatever was going on couldn't be anything good, but the small voice of self-preservation spoke up and reminded him that disobeying led to pain. Izuku started the shower, the warm water flowing across his cuts and welts and sore muscles made him wince at first, but soon he relaxed and started carefully wiping off the itchy, dried blood. His hair was so greasy that his curls were almost straight, so he washed that too, frowning as he pulled away loose strands left from Inko dragging him around by his scalp. Exiting the shower, Izuku patted himself dry and looked in the mirror. The ribs on his left side were black and blue, with the edges starting to turn green. The gash on his head started above his left eyebrow and curved down to the top of his cheekbone. His right arm was covered in cuts. Same with his outer right thigh and hip where he had fallen. His knees were like minced meat, and he could see the sparkles of glass in the wounds. Worst by far were his hands. The middle nail on his right hand was missing entirely. That left him with only 7 fingernails. Considering his right ring and left pointer finger had, that left him with only 7 fingernails. Considering his right ring and left pointer fingers had already been missing. The rest of his nails were broken and cracked. His fingertips were shredded and possibly didn't even have fingerprints anymore. Various various other cuts marked his palms and the side of his hands from sweeping up the glass. Turning around, Izuku hissed. The welts from the cane created a sickening pattern of long, thin bruises across his back, mixed with the old scars. It looked like someone had scribbled on him with black and blue. It looked like someone had scribbled on him with black, blue, and silver markers. Taking a deep breath, Izuku opened the first aid kit. He started with the tweezers, trying to pull out as much glass as he could. It made his cuts bleed anew. He used half a roll of gauze to wrap it up, not daring to get blood on the towels. Once he had wrapped up his knees and fingers and applied bandages on the worst cuts on his right side, he inspected the head wound. It would probably need stitches and would definitely scar, but butterfly bandages was all he could do. The odds of a hospital were less than 0. As Izuku finished up, he listened for Inko, trying to determine where the woman was. He could hear talking from down the hall, likely from the kitchen. He put his ear against the door. I'm positive he's quirkless. Has the extra toe. The extra toy. Frick me. Has the extra toe joint and everything. How many times are you going to ask me that? Inko sounded annoyed. Izuku's breath hitched. She was talking to someone. About him. There was silence for a moment. The damn brat has been trouble since he was born. So he's got scars. He forced me to hurt him. He forced me to hurt his pretty face last night. But what does it matter? You're not whoring him out, so his looks are irrelevant. Despite his young age, Izuku was smart. He liked research, and a recent dive into underground heroes had acquainted him with things no normal 6-year-old should know, like quirk trafficking. Praise, pain, take your pick. He'll be obedient. Izuku felt himself hyperventilating. Damaged goods are worthless, Inko had said. He was being sold. Tomorrow evening after dark, on the corner, don't be late. Inko's cell phone clattered as it was thrown onto the counter. Her footsteps marched up the hall. Scrambling back from the door, Izuku pulled off one of the bandages on his arm as Inko slammed into the room. Are you done yet? Izuku quickly replaced the bandage as if he was just finishing up and turned to face her. She grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. Her eyes trailed across the gash on his head. Ugly brat, she sneered. Good thing you don't need to be pretty where you're going. Grabbing his arm, Inko dragged Izuku, naked, back to the closet. where there was a pile of clothes in the corner. "Get dressed. This time tomorrow, you're not my problem anymore." The door slammed shut. The light under the door was just bright enough to get his clothes put on the right way. Izuku laid on the floor, letting his face almost press against the gap. He absorbed the light falling across his cheeks and breathed deeply, trying to smell fresh air, unmarred by the scent of blood. Izuku wasn't sure if he slept. Sometimes he felt like he was floating, his mind blank and far away. When he would come back to himself, he would quickly fall into a panic as analyzing his situation. He was about to be sold. What would they want from him? Would they be better than Inko? Should he make a run for it? Would anyone help him? When the morning light fell through the hall window and flooded under the door, Izuku knew his time. He was running out of time. He had no chance of escaping the closet. He had been trying for years. But tonight he would be brought outside. If he could get away, he could disappear into the maze of alleyways around his neighborhood. Living on the streets would be safer than Inko, safer than the unknown buyers. Inko came around noon, judging by the angle of the sun cutting across the hallway. She inspected his bandages, checking to see if he had hurt himself again. Satisfied he was in the same condition as the previous night, she locked the door again. A couple of hours later, he heard Inko on the floor, something about a new school. She must be talking to his school principal, making sure they wouldn't look for him when he didn't come back next week as planned. The dim afternoon light was fading fast. When Inko opened the door again, she placed another bowl of rice on the ground and left. He heard the front door open and close. That was odd. Food 2 days in a row? Izuku approached the bowl cautiously. It looked and smelt okay, but Izuku was suspicious. It had to be drugged. Izuku's mind raced. He couldn't just not eat it, but being drugged during the handoff was not an option if he wanted to escape. He had to hide the food. Looking around, Izuku could see nothing obvious. The walls were a dead end. He had tried to break through them many times, but the drywall was backed with plywood. The ceiling, maybe? Looking up, Izuku knew he wouldn't be able to reach. The floor? Bending over, Izuku wrapped his knuckles on the floorboards. Some sounded solid, but a few were hollow, laying over spaces in the floor joints. Following the hollow-sounding board in one of the back corners, Izuku stomped on it. It bent, but sprung back when he removed his foot. He hit it again and again until a sharp crack sounded, and the board snapped in half. Grinding his teeth through the pain and and coursing his damaged fingers to bleed through the bandages. Izuku pried the floorboard up and revealed a small space. He quickly dumped the rice into the hole and laid the board back over it. If Inko looked too closely, she would know, but he was betting she wouldn't. The closet had been pitch black for a few hours by the time Inko returned and opened the door a final time. Izuku was already sitting in the corner, empty bowl beside him, his head leaning against the wall, acting like he was moments away from passing out. "Your stupid brain still working, brat?" Inko pried his eyelid open and found his eye rolling back in its socket. She smacked the side of his head. "Answer me." Izuku mumbled a slurred affirmative. "Get up." She grabbed him by the collar and pulled him to his feet. Izuku pretended to almost fall over, grabbing the door for stability. He nearly fell for real when his bloody fingers slipped and smeared red along the edge. "I'm not carrying you. Go to the front door and wait." Izuku used the wall to drag himself to the front door, where he slowly slipped his shoes on. Inko was in her bedroom, blinking the glaze from his eyes. Izuku quickly tried the door. It was locked, but Izuku could reach the deadbolt. He tried again, but the door still wouldn't budge. Looking higher, he saw a slide lock at the top, too high for him to reach. Izuku relocked the door and resumed leaning lazily against the wall until Inko returned. Let's go, Null. I want to be rid of you in the next 10 minutes. Inko grabbed Inko grabbed him by the arm and ushered him outside. This time, she made the effort to hold him up in case the neighbors looked out the window. The neighborhood was quiet. The street lights were on. An old car was parked on the corner. Two men leaning on the hood, chatting and smoking. One was tall and skinny. His limbs seemed too long for his body. His his grant face was shiny and his hair greasy. The other man had a wolf mutation, with ears, a furry scruff, and a dirty muzzle full of teeth. He was huge. His hands were clawed and thick fur poked out from under his jacket sleeves. Inko made her way towards them. Izuku noted that Inko wasn't holding him very tightly, mostly just guiding him when He sluggishly shuffled along. He waited until they got to the other side of the street. Minimizing the amount of open space he had to run across. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, Izuku took his chance. The men were a few car lengths ahead, but a small alley that branched off into several different alleys was a few steps behind them. Izuku wrenched his arm from Inko's grasp and ran as fast as he could. He heard a shocked yell and a growl from the men. But Izuku didn't dare look back. The alley was right there. Once inside, he could lose them in the maze. A sharp pain erupted in Izuku's side, causing him to gasp. He fell forward against the brick wall, a mere arm's length from the alley. The pain spiked again, causing him to fall to the ground, shaking and holding his side. He looked up to see his mom flanked by the two men holding her hand towards him. "Damn, lady, I thought you had a minor telekinesis quirk. What did you do?" The skinny man asked. "My quirk lets me pull small objects towards me. Organs are pretty small, don't you think?" Inko pulled again, causing Izuku to groan and thrash. The wolf man picked Izuku up by the back of his shirt like he was a kitten. "You were supposed to drug him," he growled. "I did," Inko snapped. "Then you didn't dose him right. I thought you said he would be obedient." The wolf man shook Izuku harshly. Izuku reached up and grabbed the man's wrist, trying his best to lessen the pressure on his throat. "Hey, I had 6 years to condition the kid. He never fucked with me. He's your problem now." A low growl rumbled in the wolf's chest, but he seemed to relent when he nodded to the skinny man, who handed a duffel bag to Inko. She took it and, without a backwards glance, walked back to the apartment. "Stretch, dose him properly. You got it." Pulling a syringe from his coat, the skinny man's arms began to stretch towards Izuku like taffy. The needle aiming for his neck. Izuku tried to kick the arm, but it bent around him and kept coming. There was a sharp pain, and the feeling of coldness spread through his body. Izuku's vision darkened, and soon he was hanging limp in the wolf man's hand, like a puppet with no strings. And that's the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 will be up next, and I'll read the title of Chapter 3 and the summary to you. Chapter 3, QRKLS 0715XX MI 11. Summary. The task force assembled, and the universe continues to give Izuku a bad time. There is trigger warnings in the next one, and I'm going to be honest, in my opinion, that one's going to be a bit hard for me to read. I'm going to say this now, like I've been saying in every video I've recorded in the last 2 videos I recorded. I'm writing 3 fan fictions. You guys know one of them if you have watched it. His Treasure and My Dragon, which is a My Hero Academia podcast fanfic. The other 2 are Criminal Minds. One is a crossover. It's not the one that I'm going to read you the title of right now, which is One Step at a Time. That one is a Spencer Aaron, and it is inspired by the fan fiction called Fever Dreams from the group from the other ones in the series it's called Fever Dream in this series. It's the first one in the series of In the Room Where It Happened. Give me a sec, I'm trying to find the list so I can read you the author's name. Fever Dream, The Room Where It Happened by Heidi McGabbs. I'm sorry if I butcher names. The other fan fiction that I'm writing, which is a crossover between Supernatural and Criminal Minds, it is a Drake Morgan and Sam Winchester story. If you don't like those, then, well, I'm still doing them. I am going to be writing more, but since this is already an hour long, I'm not going to talk about that. You can learn a bit more on the last episode of Someone Like You. But until next time, my beautiful mythical creatures, peace out. Stay hydrated and eat donuts.